Just imagine.
And as messy as Drake is right now, I can almost bet that there's somebody that wants to turn his faucet off. Because if y'all think Diddy is a mess, Drake, he was being groomed to be next in line, see? What happens when the real details of what happened to XXX?
Deerfield Beach, the rapper XXXTentacion has been shot, apparently targeted while shopping for a motorcycle. Chopper 4 was over the scene on North Dixie Highway near Sample Road. The Broward Sheriff's Office says they got a call about the shooting at around 4 p.m. They say the rapper was transported to an area hospital where the Sheriff's Office says he died. We are continuing to work this story, and we'll have more on the CBSMiami.com website and on CBS 4 News at 7 and 11.
June 18th, 2018, the day hip-hop lost one of its most polarizing young stars in cold blood. XXXTentacion, just 20 years old, was gunned down in broad daylight outside Riva Motorsports in Deerfield Beach, Florida. One minute he's looking at motorcycles, the next he's ambushed in a deadly setup that shocked the culture. The killers didn't just take his life, they took a Louis Vuitton bag stuffed with $50,000 in cash, leaving fans around the world in disbelief. This wasn't just another rap tragedy, this was execution style. And it set off years of trials, theories, and whispers about who really wanted X gone. 4 men were charged: Dedrick Williams, the alleged getaway driver and the first arrested; Michael Boatwright, named as the shooter; Trayvon Newsom, accused of being the other gunman; and Robert Allen, who turned snitch to save his own skin. Allen flipped, took a plea, and gave up the whole play-by-play, pointing fingers and laying out how they stalked X, boxed him in, and pulled the trigger. The other 3, they tried to fight it, but in the end, the jury handed down life sentences to Boatwright, Newsom, and Williams. Allen walked with a lighter sentence for testifying, but in the streets, that cooperator label never goes away. The way the murder went down was straight calculated. Surveillance cameras caught the black Dodge Journey blocking X's BMW i8 in the Riva parking lot. 2 masked men jumped out, one with a rifle, one with a handgun. They wrestled with X, shots rang out, and just like that, the rising star was slumped in his seat. They snatched the bag, jumped back in the SUV, and peeled off. No hesitation, no mistakes, like they'd done this before. That precision is part of why so many people believe this was bigger than just a robbery.
Williams, you are the perfect example of why we have a law of principles in this state. When you engage in criminal acts with others, you bear the responsibility for your collective actions. It was you who picked the target in this case. You went inside Riva Motorsports, confirmed the identification and what was there, and then you went back out and sat in the vehicle. Now, while you may not have left the vehicle and you may not have brandished the firearm or fired the fatal shots, you are as guilty as they are, because you were an essential part of that crime. Without your actions, it would not have happened.
The prosecution painted it as a robbery gone wrong, fueled by social media posts of X flexing cash. But the defense, they had a different spin, and it's the one that still keeps this case alive in conspiracy circles. They hinted this was a hit, and some people with way more influence than these 4 dudes might have been involved. And that's where the wildest theory came in: the alleged Drake connection. Now let's get this straight. Drake was never charged, never officially named a suspect, but his name got dragged into court because of a messy history with X. Back in 2017, X accused Drake of biting his flow on KMT. He called Drake a fraud, threw shots online, and the beef got personal fast. X even tweeted, "If anyone tries to kill me, it was at Champagne Poppy," before deleting it. It might have been trolling at the time, but when X ended up dead months later, fans started putting 2 and 2 together, fair or not. In court, Dedrick Williams' lawyer tried to make Drake part of the defense, arguing that investigators ignored other possible suspects, including the biggest rapper in the world, even though there was public tension between him and the victim. They subpoenaed Drake for a deposition, but he never showed. His legal team called it a stunt, saying he had nothing to do with it. The judge let him slide, which only fueled online speculation. And then there were the lyrics. People pulled lines from Drake's music that sounded way too close to home. like on I'm Upset, where he raps SMS XXX, that's the only time I shoot below the neck, or on I'm On One, where he talks about getting revenge quick. To most people, that's just rap talk. But in the context of X's murder, the defense argued those bars fed into a narrative the police never wanted to investigate. The trial itself was intense. Prosecutors used Robert Allen's testimony to lock in the timeline, show the planning, and prove all 4 men were in on it. The defense tried to poke holes, pointing to lack of DNA, questionable eyewitness accounts, and that ignored other suspect angle. But the jury wasn't having it. When the verdict came down, 3 men were sentenced to life without parole. Case closed, right? Not exactly. Because here's the thing, just because the court says it's over, don't mean the streets stopped talking. Theories kept swirling about missing footage, about who bankrolled the hit, and about whether this was really just about that $50K in cash. Ma Dollar E once said in another context, the truth don't hide forever. And for a lot of X's fans, this case still feels like there's a whole chapter missing. Once the verdicts were handed down, you'd think the story would fade, but this case just wouldn't die. That's because the defense for Dedrick Williams refused to let it go. They filed appeals, claiming he didn't get a fair trial. And their main argument, that key evidence about other possible suspects got buried. Suspects that included Drake. They pushed the idea that the whole robbery angle was just the surface, and that there were bigger players with more to gain from X's death. The lawyers didn't just throw Drake's name out there for clout, they pointed to specific reasons. First, the public beef. Everybody in hip-hop remembers when X came home from jail and went right at Drake, accusing him of jacking his flow from Look at Me on KMT. It was bold, it was loud, and it got under Drake's skin enough that the two exchanged subliminals for months. Then there was that infamous tweet from X, "If anyone kills me, it's at Champagne Papi." He deleted it, but screenshots live forever. And while some fans brushed it off as trolling, others swore it was a warning.
For more than a week of deliberations in the murder of South Florida rapper XXXTentacion.
The verdict is about to be read in a Fort Lauderdale courtroom. Let's listen in live now.
All right, the verdicts appear to be in proper form. I will publish. In the Circuit Court of the 17th Judicial Circuit in Fort Broward County, Florida, the state of Florida versus Dedrick Williams, verdict count 1. We, the jury, find as follows: as to the defendant, Dedrick Williams, in this case, the defendant is guilty of murder in the first degree as charged in the indictment. Count 2. We, the jury, find as follows: as to the defendant, Dedrick Williams, in this case, the defendant is guilty of armed robbery as charged in the indictment. Count 1. We, the jury, find as follows: as to the defendant, Michael Boatwright, in this case, the defendant is guilty of murder in the first degree as charged in the indictment. During the course of the crime committed, did the defendant, Michael Boatwright, actually possess a firearm? Yes. During the course of the crime committed, did the defendant, Michael Boatwright, actually discharge a firearm? Yes. During the course of the crime committed, did the defendant, Michael Boatwright, actually inflict death to Jase Onfroy as a result of discharging a firearm in his possession? Yes. Count 2. We, the jury, find as follows: as to the defendant, Michael Boatwright, in this case, the defendant is guilty of armed robbery as charged in the indictment. During the course of the crime committed, did the defendant, Michael Boatwright, actually possess a firearm? Yes. During the course of the crime committed, did the defendant, Michael Boatwright, actually discharge a firearm? Yes. During the course of the crime committed, did the defendant, Michael Boatwright, actually inflict death to Jase Onfroy as a result of discharging a firearm in his possession? Yes. Verdict, count 1. We, the jury, find as follows: as to the defendant, Trayvon Newsom, in this case, the defendant is guilty of murder in the first degree as charged in the indictment. During the course of the crime committed, did the defendant, Trayvon Newsom, actually possess a firearm? Yes. Count 2. We, the jury, find as follows: as to the defendant, Trayvon Newsom, in this case, The defendant is guilty of armed robbery as charged in the indictment.
In court, Williams' defense said investigators never seriously pursued that lead. They subpoenaed Drake for a deposition, basically to answer questions under oath, but he never showed. His lawyers argued it was a publicity stunt to distract from the real evidence. The judge agreed, let Drake off the hook, and kept the trial focused on the 4 men charged. But outside that courtroom, the streets weren't buying it. To them, the no-show only made the theory stronger. And the lyrics? They became Exhibit A in the court of public opinion. That SMS XXX, that's the only time I shoot below the neckline on I'm upset. People clipped it, slowed it down, analyzed it like it was a confession. Then you had other bars about getting revenge and settling scores that fans connected back to the beef. Of course, rappers rap about violence all the time. It's part of the art form. But when you're tied to a public feud with a guy who ends up murdered in a way that matches the imagery, it's like pouring gasoline on a conspiracy fire. The defense even tried to bring in a gang expert who claimed there were ties between Drake and known affiliates of the accused. This was risky. It blurred the line between theory and evidence. But they argued it painted a fuller picture of who might have wanted X gone. The problem? The judge blocked most of it, saying it was too speculative. And that's where the defense felt cheated, because the prosecution's witnesses got to speak freely about gang life and criminal connections, but the defense's angles on alternative suspects got chopped down before they could land. Meanwhile, Robert Allen's testimony kept the state's case airtight. He walked the jury through every step, how they spotted X at the bank, followed him to Riva Motorsports, waited in the lot, and blocked him in. He admitted his own role in the robbery, but pointed the gunplay at Boatwright and Newsom. Allen's cooperation meant the state didn't need much else. They had an insider telling the whole story from the stand. And the jury believed him, even if the streets still questioned why the money motive lined up so perfectly with a high-profile target in the middle of a very public feud. The autopsy photos, the surveillance footage, the banking records, they all lined up for the state. It was enough to convict, but for X's diehard fans, it didn't erase the bigger why. Why did they pick him? Why that day? Why with that much precision? That's where the robbery theory feels too neat. Ma Dollar E said in another interview about a different situation, if it feels too perfect, somebody made it perfect. And that's exactly how a lot of people see this murder. Even X's mom, Cleopatra Bernard, acknowledged there was real tension between her son and Drake before he died. She's been careful with her words, but she hasn't denied that X felt threatened. To fans, that's enough to keep the door open for theories. And every time new details come out, like Drake dodging that deposition, it just keeps the conversation alive. So now you got 2 versions of this story. The official one, where 4 broke dudes saw an opportunity and killed a rapper for his cash. And the underground version, where that cash was just the excuse and the real motive was revenge. The jury might have picked the first version, but the second one, that's the one that's still echoing through the culture. After the guilty verdicts, you'd think the legal drama would slow down. But nah, Dedrick Williams and his team came right back swinging. They filed an appeal saying flat out that his trial was unfair. In their eyes, the judge didn't just favor the prosecution. He blocked the defense from exploring angles that could have changed the whole vibe of the case. And top of that list, the Drake lead. Williams' lawyers argued the state cherry-picked what evidence the jury could hear. They let in every gritty detail about Williams' past, the surveillance footage, Robert Allen's full testimony. But when it came to potential alternative suspects with motive, they hit a wall. The court wasn't interested in celebrity names or theories about industry beef. To the defense, that wasn't just selective, it was strategic. If jurors had heard more about the Drake tension, maybe they'd have seen this as something bigger than a random stick-up. The appeal also pointed to alleged overreach by the prosecution. They claimed cops locked in on Williams and his co-defendants way too early, treating them like the only suspects from day one. No deep dive into other possible players. No serious exploration of whether someone bankrolled the move. It's like they had their ending before they even wrote the middle of the story. And in the background, the conspiracy crowd kept receipts. They brought back old clips of X talking about how he had enemies in high places. They reposted that deleted tweet tagging Drake. They dissected lyrics, interviews, and body language like it was a murder mystery podcast. The theory had legs not because of hard proof, but because so much about the official story felt too clean. To make it messier, there's the timeline. The killers didn't just randomly bump into X. They were positioned to intercept him after he left the bank with that cash. According to Robert Allen, they were already on the hunt for a lick that day. But some people believe they weren't just hunting anyone, they were hunting him specifically. That's where the precision feels less like luck and more like instruction. The defense even hinted that the robbery might have been staged as the public cover, with the real motive being personal. But when they tried to push that narrative in court, the objections came quick and the judge shut it down. You could almost feel the frustration in the defense table. They weren't just fighting the state, they were fighting the rules of what they could even say. Meanwhile, Williams sat in prison claiming he wasn't the mastermind, just the driver. He said he didn't pull the trigger, didn't touch the money, and didn't plan the hit. To the jury, that didn't matter. Florida law makes you just as guilty if you're part of the robbery. But in the streets, the details matter. If you didn't do the shooting, you can still tell your version of what went down. And Williams' version leaves the door open for people to believe there's more to this than we've been told. On the outside, X's fans never stopped connecting dots. They noticed how fast the trial moved for a high-profile murder. They questioned why the court didn't subpoena more phone records, or why certain security footage never saw daylight. They asked why Drake's no-show didn't bring more pushback from the judge. Every gap in the timeline became a breeding ground for suspicion. Even industry folks started speaking up in subtle ways. Some artists who knew X dropped cryptic posts about fake love and industry snakes after his death. Others stayed completely silent, maybe out of fear, maybe out of not wanting to be tied to something bigger than music. In that silence, for a lot of fans, it spoke louder than any denial. By now, the case is technically solved, but the way it went down left a crack big enough for all kinds of theories to leak through. And in hip-hop, once a theory takes hold, especially one involving a superstar, it lives forever, which is why, even with 3 men serving life and 1 cooperator locked up, this story still hangs over the culture like a shadow. Now we at the final chapter, and even though the court called it case closed, this story still feels wide open. The trial might have given the state their win, but it didn't give the culture closure. X's murder was too public, too calculated, and tied to too many unanswered questions. And for his fans, especially the ones who watched him rise from SoundCloud rebel to global star, it's hard to accept that the why boils down to just some quick cash grab. For Drake, whether fair or not, the shadow of this case has lingered. He's addressed it indirectly in interviews, brushing off the rumors as ridiculous, but the internet never forgets. Every time an anniversary of X's death comes around, those old tweets and lyrics resurface, memes pop up, threads get made, YouTube true crime channels break it down like a Netflix doc. And while there's no hard evidence tying him to anything, public perception don't always move on just because the law did. The conspiracy crowd still points to the fact that Drake dodged that deposition. They ask, if you got nothing to hide, why not just show up and shut it down? His team says it's about not feeding baseless claims, but the streets don't think like lawyers. In their eyes, skipping that moment left a permanent what if attached to his name in this case. For X's legacy, the impact is even deeper. His death froze him in time, forever young, forever controversial, forever the artist who never got to finish his story. And because of how messy his life was, legal troubles, public feuds, redemption arcs, his murder became part of the myth. Fans still debate who he could have become, what kind of music he'd be making now, and whether he'd still be beefing with the same people. That mystery fuels the legend, but it also keeps the wound fresh. The appeal fight from Williams' camp is still hanging out there, even if it's a long shot. And if by some twist the court grants a new trial, it could blow this whole thing open again. New witnesses, new evidence, maybe even more room to push those ignored suspect theories. That's why some people are still watching this case like it's not over. Because in the legal world, until every appeal is dead, the door is still cracked. And the way this all played out set a new example for how high-profile hip-hop murders get handled. The state moved quick, locked in a narrative, and stuck to it. The defense tried to push a bigger, more complicated picture, but the court kept it tight. Now, other cases might follow that same pattern, keep the jury focused on the people in front of them, not the ones in the shadows. Whether that's justice or just convenience depends on who you ask. One thing's for sure, in the streets, people don't forget the way things feel. And this case felt like there was more to it. More planning, more motive, more players. The facts on paper might satisfy the law, but in the court of public opinion, the jury's still out. And that's why, years later, we're still talking about it, still breaking it down, still side-eyeing the details, still wondering if we ever got the whole truth. So when you look at XXXTentacion's murder, you can read the headlines and get the official version. 4 men, 1 robbery, 1 tragic ending. Or you can look at the whispers, the timing, the history, and see something that feels bigger, darker, and harder to prove. And in hip-hop, sometimes it's that second version that sticks the longest. Because in this culture, the truth ain't just what's in the court record, it's what people believe. And right now, a lot of people believe we still don't know the full story of who really wanted X gone.